Welcome back, Bears fans. I'm Jerry with Da Bears Pod, and we're going to get into Jaylon Johnson's contract. I was really disappointed at the initial news that he was being franchise tagged because I thought it was going to be the same old shit with the Bears and how they handled these franchise tags. And then I read into it and I realized that there's actually a lot more good from it than anything. And when you really look at the details, it's not bad that they franchise tagged him. Maybe for Jaylon Johnson a little bit, kind of a little bit of a slap in the face with what's called a non-exclusive tag. We'll get into that in a little bit. This video is mostly going to be about the Jaylon Johnson franchise tag and history of the franchise tag with the Chicago Bears, as well as some moves in the past that weren't so great and maybe were great. So like, comment, subscribe, and let's get right into it. So I really think they need to extend Jaylon Johnson. They can't let any more good players go. If you look at what happened last year with Roquan Smith was by far the best player on the defense, and Ryan Poles didn't want to pay him. You could make arguments both ways that maybe he wasn't worth it and he didn't want to reset the market for a linebacker. Now, finally, that Roquan Smith got out of the NFC, he was able to get the Pro Bowl and all the All-Pro votings and get what he deserved because he didn't have to fight with Fred Warner anymore. But he really was playing as well as he was on the Bears and wasn't getting the recognition for it. So if you look at what ended up happening with that situation, Ryan Poles decided he didn't want to reset the market and didn't want to move forward with Roquan Smith. So he decided, all right, let him go. Ravens end up paying him a 5-year, $100 million deal that was guaranteed $60 million. So that ends up being $20 million a year. We go out, and the whole thought of it was, well, we can get 2 linebackers for almost the same cost as Roquan. That wasn't quite the case. Tremaine Edmunds ends up getting a 4-year, $72 million contract. That's $18 million a year. That was still guaranteed $50 million, which, as far as on a yearly basis, is very similar to the $60 million that Roquan was guaranteed. But between the 18 and the $20 million, I think all Bears fans could admit that that was an overpay for Tremaine Edmunds, and we really did take a step back at linebacker. Now, you could also argue that the Bears have one of the best linebacker cores altogether with the emergence 2 years ago of Jack Sanborn, and with his still good play, and crazy to say that he might be the 3rd best linebacker in that group, because when the Roquan trade happened, he really did shine for the remaining of that season at the Mike linebacker spot where he was playing. Now he gets moved out, and he's still playing well. But let's talk about the other linebacker, TJ Edwards, where Poles lost in Tremaine Edmunds. We get a smoking deal in TJ Edwards at 3 years, $19.5 million, averaging $6.5 a year, only guaranteed $7.9 million. So great contract. You're pairing the Wisconsin linebackers together in Sanborn and TJ Edwards. And also a Chicago guy, bringing him in. I like that the TJ Edwards signing was a huge signing. Now, I think you might argue that you'd rather have Roquan, TJ Edwards, and Jack Sanborn. That would probably be one of the greatest linebacker cores in history, arguing, maybe Urlacher, Briggs, and Hillenmeyer, or if you wanted to bring up the 49ers with Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, and that whole era, like, make all those arguments that you want. But I would have absolutely paid the $2 more million a year to have Roquan Smith, the homegrown guy, be on the team over Tremaine Edmunds. It didn't work out. Still have a great linebacker group, so that did end up working out. But now let's look at Jaylon Johnson's contract. So we're going to assume that he's trying to be the highest paid cornerback in the league, and that seems to be pretty fair. So if you look at what they were paid, Jair Alexander received a $21 million a year contract, and that at the time was about 9.5 to 10% of the salary cap. Well, because that was back in 2022, the salary cap has since raised. In total, I believe it's about 45 million since 2022. So at that pace, you would assume that Jaylon Johnson is going to expect that sort of percentage. And we're actually moving forward. There is a chance that players, with how fast the salary cap is increasing, they might ask for percentage-based contracts moving forward. But now that the contracts or the salary cap is $255 million, that would mean it would be around 25.5 million, or if it's on the low end of that scale that they would be looking for, it'd be around 24.5 million. Now, what the Bears could do to argue against that is they could say, well, Jair Alexander, has his play been better? Is he better? And actually, I'll have some stats where we can go over that. Also, availability. Jaylon Johnson hasn't been available. He's been injured. He's had those injury problems, and he's also had issues with not getting interceptions for the first 3 years. Now, he made up for that this year, but he dropped 2 pick sixes this year and dropped some other interceptions that would have made his numbers outstanding. So if you look at where a lot of the top cornerbacks, I might go over some other ones, but specifically Jaylon Johnson and Jair Alexander are the ones I've been wanting to go over because he's looking to, be the new highest paid. Jair Alexander is the current highest paid. So if you look at them side by side, as far as coverage snaps, Jaylon Johnson actually has 117 more coverage snaps, and this, I believe, is over the last 3 years. All the stats that I have were compiled to be pretty similar. So coverage snaps, he has 1918, and Jair Alexander only has 1801. Now, Jaylon Johnson has 13 touchdowns allowed to Jair's 10. Yards allowed, Jaylon Johnson has one of the lower numbers at 1750, while Jair, with more receptions allowed and less touchdowns allowed, has the higher 1916. So he's about 150 more yards allowed. Let's look at the catch rate. So Jair Alexander has been targeted 24 more times, which speaks a lot and goes to show how good Jaylon Johnson is, because if you want to talk about a top corner, Jaylon Johnson has 120 more coverage snaps than Jair Alexander, but he has 24 less targets. So if you're going to look at Jair Alexander and say that he's a top corner, the fact that Jaylon Johnson has allowed that many less targets with that many more snaps, that alone is huge. Receptions allowed. Jaylon Johnson has only allowed 134, whereas Jair has allowed 151. Naturally, with more targets, you're going to allow more receptions, but again, huge part of his play. So the catch rate percentage, Jaylon Johnson's 55.8, Jair is 57.2. Looking at all those numbers side by side, interceptions are tied, by the way, should factor that in. Looking at all those numbers side by side, the only category where Jair Alexander wins is touchdowns allowed, and that's 10. And 10 versus 13. Granted, he has 120 less coverage snaps, so obviously he's going to be lower. Let's look at yards per coverage snap. 0.91 for Jaylon Johnson, 1.06 for Jair. So looking at both of those, Jaylon Johnson is far above and beyond in every category except touchdowns versus Jair versus Jaylon Johnson. And I guess, you can argue the interceptions are tied as well. Not great. But looking at everything, there is all the reason that Jaylon Johnson should get paid. In my opinion, the way I was looking at it, if he wants to be the new highest paid, I was kind of looking at it as, he's probably going to want $22 million, become the new highest paid. Ryan Poles signed the contract to get the deal done. But then once I looked at the contract breakdown and how much the salary cap has increased, I'm not surprised that Jaylon Johnson and his team wouldn't be asking for more money, because if you're going based on the percentage of the cap, if you went $22 million, he would actually be not severely, but he would be underpaid per the players he's been going up against. So I think looking into that, it makes it very important. And if I'm Ryan Poles, honestly, I wouldn't mind paying him $24 million at this point. Looking at all the numbers, figuring everything out, that would put him at about a 9.5% of the cap, which is what Denzel Ward is currently getting at $20.1 million. He was paid the same offseason as Jair Alexander, and Denzel Ward's stats actually look very similar to Jaylon Johnson's, having a very similar yards per coverage snap. The one big thing that Denzel Ward has is 10 interceptions versus Jaylon Johnson's 5. He also, Denzel Ward, has 50 more targets allowed than Jaylon Johnson with similar coverage snaps. So again, I would say that what do you want? Do you want a guy like Jaylon Johnson that can absolutely lock down the wide receiver one and make their life hell as far as even being targeted? Or do you want him to maybe slack off a little bit more and get those interceptions? Also, that mindset was really only instilled the last 2 seasons with Eberflus wanting to get turnovers. And when he finally was asked, Jaylon Johnson did deliver, and he got those interceptions. So I think the improvement on that is fair enough to where he deserves. Again, I would pay $24 million if Jaylon Johnson said, "Hey, yeah, we'll do 4 years, $24 million average per year, probably getting like $50 million guaranteed." I would sign it all day if I'm Ryan Poles. I think they should do that. I'd be interested to see where Jaylon Johnson is in the market. But now here gets to the interesting part, and what I learned that made me feel a lot better about the franchise tag. The franchise tag that they did is called a non-exclusive franchise tag. Now, what that means is he has a franchise tag on him. Other teams will have an opportunity to sign him, so they can sign him if they think that he's worth, a 5-year, $100 million, or I guess it'd be like $110 million contract. It'd be like 22 and a half a year for 5 years, whatever's guaranteed. If they offer that, let's say, for example, a team that was showed some interest, at least for Jaylon, was the 49ers. If they were to offer that, the Bears have the opportunity to match that. So they can match whatever the best deal is that this other team puts out, and then they can sign him to that exact same deal, and it's done and over with. Or if they believe that the value is too high, that the other team, so if they put this 5-year, $110 million contract, let's just for example, and it turns out that we don't sign him, we choose not to, they have to give up 2 first-round picks to us. With that being said, that makes it a lot better situation, and I think Ryan Poles is doing a great job of playing chess, not checkers here. But again, I think that could also piss off Jaylon Johnson, because it sounds like ultimately he wants to get a contract done in Chicago. So why are you giving me the opportunity to leave? And it's probably a very difficult conversation because he wants as much money as possible. He also probably wants to go home, and it's making it a very difficult situation. Now, what I believe with this could be the worst situation is if no other team signs him. And I am worried about that because the other team, when they propose the contract, they have to be in fear of giving up 2 first-round picks if it doesn't work out. And for me personally, I don't want to get rid of good players, so I'd probably still sign him unless they offer him like $26 million a year for 5 years. Ryan Poles proposed that they were offering a contract that gave him the opportunity to explore free agent options later, which would lead you to assume that maybe it was a shorter contract. Now, we don't know if that's what Jaylon wanted. It could have been only a 3-year. Like, let's say if it was a 3-year, $75 million deal, $50 million guaranteed or something. I don't see how Jaylon Johnson, he'd have 2 years guaranteed with the $50 million. He'd have 3 years making $25 million a year. That also seems pretty fair to me. You can get out of it sooner if you want. If the salary cap continues to shoot up, he gets an opportunity to get paid even more later if he keeps playing well, or if his play drops off, probably has to take less. And I could see that happening too. I think that would probably be more of what I would lean towards, just so you're not locked into as long of a term deal. But then again, the worst situation that I think could happen is if no team chooses to sign him, as I was saying, where you have to give up 2 first-round picks if we choose not to re-sign. Poles might really like that. And if he doesn't like the deal that was offered, that is a scary thing because then we get nothing. He'll have to play this year on the franchise tag. Yes, he could hold out and decide not to play, but still being on his rookie contract, he would not be making very much money. So he's not really in a position where he would be able to do that. But He could if he really wanted to. But if no team chooses to sign, we'll be in the clear once a team chooses to sign him, because I believe once a contract's put out, Poles is going to just accept what it is, unless it really is ridiculous. And if it really is ridiculous, he can deny it, and we get 2 first-round picks. So we really just need a contract to come out at this point, and preferably it would just be with the Bears to begin with. They have until, I believe, July 10th to figure out that situation. So I'm really hoping that that just happens and it's over with and we're done. But it is something to worry about. Now, another thing that you might have to worry about is the last players that we franchise tagged. So the last player that we franchise tagged was Allen Robinson in 2021. His contract, we didn't get a contract done. You'll franchise tag somebody with the hopes to get a contract done to keep them around. In this case, weren't able to keep Allen Robinson around. Whether that was good or bad, he kind of fell off after, so maybe it was a good thing. Doesn't really matter, though, because our most recent franchise tag, we did not come to a deal. Alshon Jeffrey, the last franchise tag. What happened? Weren't able to come to a deal. Then, if anybody remembers, Henry Melton, before that, franchise tagged him. Weren't able to come to a deal. And I understand that those were previous regimes, so that's not necessarily Ryan Poles, but because it is a money thing, I'm sure the McCaskies have something to do with it. And it doesn't bode well that you aren't able to keep these good players around. And we haven't really seen Poles. I mean, you could say, yes, I guess Cole Kmet got signed. That's good. DJ Moore, good. Montez Sweat, so far so good. But, I mean, look at other long-term deals. Tremaine Edmonds didn't really work out. I don't know if you could classify TJ Edwards as a long-term deal. We don't have anybody signed to a long-term deal on the offensive line. Defensive line, again, it's just Montez Sweat. So I am a big fan of Poles, and I think he makes a lot of good moves, but I really want to see that improve with making the correct signings. And with a guy like Jaylon Johnson, he's been around for it all so far in these past years. We need to get him re-signed, in my opinion. So, as I said, Henry Melton was the last one, and he did not get signed. The last person you have to go back to is Matt Forte in 2012. We franchise tagged him, end up signing a 4-year deal. I believe he played 3 more seasons in Chicago, and then went on to the Jets, where a lot of running backs go to die. And then before that, Lance Briggs was the other most recent franchise tag, and he was also a fairly unique situation because we franchise tagged him in 2007. He played out 2007, but we didn't sign him until 2008. We signed him to a 6-year deal. So that one would be in a case where we just franchise tagged Jaylon Johnson, but he would have to play the whole season on the franchise tag, and then we'd have to sign him next year, which I don't want to wait anymore. Let's get the good players signed to long-term deals. So I hope this helped with anybody that was curious on how the Jaylon Johnson contract worked and what I believe we need to do to get this done. It's not right. As Bears fans, we deserve better. We deserve to be able to see our players grow, grow with the team, get contracts they deserve. Jaylon Johnson, arguably one of the best corners, if not the best cornerback last season. And in years prior, he wasn't really getting the recognition because he didn't have the interceptions, but he was still a really good corner every year he's been in the league. And we need to show the teammates that we will reward for that. So I hope we can get it done. Let me know what you think. What would you be willing to offer Jaylon Johnson as far as a contract goes? Would you rather do a 3-year or you want a longer contract? Would you be willing to pay him $25 million, or are you closer to 21, 22? Let me know down below. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bear down and have a great day.